So, as you can tell, there was a pile on Michael Bloomberg, but it's Bernie Sanders who keeps charging towards this nomination. So we're going to hear from both sides of the political divide in America now. I'm joined by Spencer Critchley, who is a Democratic strategist in California, former communications advisor on the Obama campaigns in 2008 and 2012, and Lacey Lee Johnson, the Republican candidate for Congress in Michigan. So, Spencer, let me bring you in here first from the Democratic side. I mean, look, there was this massive pile-on Michael Bloomberg, but I'm reading a lot of top U.S. political advisors who say this is actually pretty unwise, because right now Bernie Sanders is charging towards this nomination and he could be unstoppable very soon.
Yeah, I think that I agree with that. I think Bernie did emerge as the winner from that debate, and the attacks on Bloomberg ended up benefiting him. I think that, one of the things that concerned me most about the debate was that it looked panicky. I think that that's not true of everybody who was up there. I think Bernie sort of stayed on his center, as he has all the way along. One of his strengths is his consistency. And I think Pete Buttigieg, in terms of manner at least, managed to maintain this sense of a still core, but the others were raising their voices, and the tempo of their voices was picking up. And as a communications person, I often tend to look at what impression people are creating, what emotional impression they're creating, even more than the content of what they're saying, and because that's what ends up swaying voters in terms of whether they think somebody is coming across as a leader or not. So it felt a bit to me like they were flailing, trying to find a way to claim the moderate spot from Bloomberg. As forceful as Elizabeth Warren was, I felt it kind of made her look a little inconsistent, because a few months ago she seemed to be trying to claim the progressive spot from Bernie. So overall, I thought it was kind of a mess, and I think Bernie, by staying on message and not getting too rattled, just gained ground.
What about Joseph Biden? He was the favorite, former, of course, vice president to Obama. His campaign looking well and truly dead in the water. Did he do anything to save his campaign last night?
I thought he had a fairly good night. You'll notice nobody was really attacking him, which again, communicates a certain sense of flailing about. I think he was being attacked left and right when everybody thought he was the front runner, and then last night they were attacking Bloomberg. It didn't, and again, not particularly strategically. This is an example of what I'm saying. Joe Biden is a very substantive candidate, whether you support him or not. He has the kind of record you would think would prepare somebody perfectly for the presidency, apart, again, from how you feel about his particular policies. Just decades of high-level experience and, the vice president in a very successful administration. And yet the impression he's been creating through, I think, a not well-led campaign has been a kind of a sense of directionlessness and lack of energy, and that's what is putting voters off, I would say.
Let's bring in Lacey Lee Johnson from the Republican side. I mean, Lacey, this idea that Bernie Sanders might be taking on Donald Trump, presume that is music to the Republicans' ears.
Well, from where I stand, Trump will beat any of them. But what separates Bernie Sanders from the rest of the candidates, he actually stands for something, and he's passionate about it, and he's a good debater. The rest of the candidates, the only thing they seem to stand for is that we need to vote Trump out, and the voters don't know what else they stand for. And I just see the Democrats making the same mistake they made all along. They still don't get it. They haven't gotten it from when Trump came down the escalators, why people are supporting Trump and the things he stands for. They still want to make it about identity politics, but it's really about issues. Issues like globalism and things like that, trade wars, borders. We don't want to be the world police anymore. We don't want to be the ATM for the world. We want to make all the different groups and organizations, United Nations or whatever, NATO, pay their fair share. We're about rebuilding the manufacturing versus deindustrializing in favor of China. So those are the type of things that voters are really concerned about. And the Democrats seem to be always hung up on identity politics and racism and sexism and things like that. And I just don't think it's going to get them across the finish line.
Well, it's very similar to what Tony Blair has been saying about the Labour Party in this country today, something we discussed on the show earlier. Look, interesting, Lacey, just the second, actually, I've just seen a tweet from Donald Trump that he's just posted, and he's actually quoting Mike Bloomberg, who has said the real winner last night was Donald Trump. And Trump then goes on to say, mini Mike Bloomberg, I agree. Now, what's this idea of him making constant jabs about Mike Bloomberg's height? Is that really appropriate for the US president to be digging out someone as a result of their physical appearance?
Well, it may, in some people's judgment, not be appropriate, but I think more important to Trump supporters is different. We want to hear politicians talk differently. We want to hear them do things differently. We want to see processes and procedures done differently because we don't like the results that the previous verbiage has gained us.
But what does Mike Bloomberg's height have to do with whether he would be a good president?
It has very little to do whether or not he would be a good president. But here's the thing: it's recognizing that people do vote on what they see. The reason Nixon lost the 1960 debate wasn't because of what he said; it was because of how he looked. And whether we want to realize it or not, that's important to vote. I wish it wasn't. I mean, Abraham Lincoln would have never gotten.
No, I know. I just personally don't really care how tall a politician is. It's just a bit of an odd one. But look, Spencer, let me bring Spencer back in, Democratic strategist, previously worked for Obama. Spencer, look, how bad is it for the Democrats if Bernie Sanders somehow manages almost by default to take this nomination because the moderate candidates are splitting the vote? I mean, is there any chance that Bernie Sanders could ever beat Trump?
I think it would be extremely risky, and it gets back to branding because socialism is such a toxic brand for so many Americans. And I'd like to pick up on something that Lacey just said
Please
that
do.
I partly agree with and partly disagree with 180 degrees. So I agree that most Democrats don't get why Trump is so popular. But I disagree that it's about Democrats focusing on identity politics and Trump focusing on policy. I actually think Trump is completely incoherent on policy and very focused on identity politics and essentially represents a different view of America based on ethnic identity rather than civic identity, although at the same time that same movement is happening on the left, just in a different way.
So who are you backing,
What really
Spencer?
explains Trump is that he's speaking to a very large segment of the American population. It's a very large minority who have felt left behind and snubbed and ignored for decades, as actually the moderate wings of both the Republican and Democratic parties kind of converged in the middle in the form of this kind of global knowledge economy, dare I say it, elite. And I think that's what's really going on here. And part of the risk of Bernie Sanders is he thinks this is still a battle between economic classes in a sort of old-style socialist analysis. It's the working class versus the capitalist class. I think this is a battle between ethnic tribes, really, and I don't just mean race. Racism is definitely part of Trump's appeal. He deliberately exploits it, going back to the racist birther conspiracy theory, but that's not all of it. It's cultural as well.
So who are you backing, Spencer?
Really going on.
Who are you backing?
I'm actually not backing any of the candidates because I want to be able to.
Who are you most keen on?
There are a few of them who I like quite a bit. I think that I've always liked Joe Biden from having worked with him. Everybody who's ever worked with him loves him. I think Pete Buttigieg is very impressive. Amy Klobuchar is very impressive. Sanders is very impressive as a campaigner in many ways. I just don't think calling yourself a socialist makes any sense at all in the United States.
Sanders versus Trump, it could be absolutely fascinating, but of course it didn't work here when the Labour Party went for Jeremy Corbyn. He suffered a historic defeat, but absolutely fascinating stuff. Wow, this battle is heating up. I think it's Saturday night. The Nevada caucuses take place, so we will watch that result. Spencer Critchley, the Democratic strategist in California, communications advisor on the Obama campaigns in both 2008 and 2012. Before that, the voice of Lacey Lee Johnson, who's a Republican candidate for Congress in Michigan.